going to introduce the first of our speakers, which is Roberto Serralde. Roberto's with Basham, Ringe, and Correa in Mexico. And Roberto, I'm going to turn it over to you and tell us how things are going in Mexico in the legal environment and what we might be interested in hearing.
Perfect. Thanks, Larry. Thanks everyone for having me. So the way that I drafted this talk, it's just to oversee some of the top legal issues that we do have currently in our country, some of the key threats that might be facing our firms and also our clients, the key opportunities that we are seeing for the future, and how can we take opportunity of those to render services or to advise clients. And finally, it's how do we see the future of trade and foreign investment in the country. So those would be the topics that I would like to discuss with you all today. So the first thing in the agenda for me, of course, it's the entry into force of the USMCA. The USMCA, as you're aware, entered into force on July the 1st. Right now, a lot of companies, they are kind of struggling on whether they do have the internal controls to keep their operations if they did their prior work before the agreement entering into force. Also, right now, they are dealing with some issues because not all of their suppliers provide them certificates of origin or certifications of origin, because right now it's a different thing in the agreement. So it has been a busy week or the last 2 weeks for us in Mexico, in the US, and Canada, of course, because we left everything for the last minute. The CBP in the US published their interim guidelines. In Mexico, everything was published on the last week. There were a lot of legislative changes that need to take place prior of the entry into force of the USMCA, and the Senate and the Deputies Chamber just have their sessions on Monday and Tuesday, just prior of the entry into force, which was a Wednesday. So we are still reading a lot of things that were published during those days, but at the end of the day, I do believe that there's a lot of room for us as practitioners and also for our clients to get a lot of benefits, to try to have a more integrated supply chain within the region that will lead us to have some competitive advantage against Asia and, of course, some of the countries in Europe. So in Mexico, pretty much the key changes that will impact the operation, of course, would be the automotive industry. Most of the discussion during the during the NAFTA renegotiation that at the end of the day ultimately lead to to entering into the USMCA was, of course, this big chunk of investment that was at the end of the day targeted by the US government. Just for everyone's benefit, in the last 10 years, a lot of OEMs came into Mexico. They built their own manufacturing facilities, and the investment that we received was, ballpark speaking, around $25 billion. So not a lot of that investment, of course, did not, or it wasn't received in the US, and not of the most of the OEMs did not build any manufacturing facilities over the past 10 years in the US or Canada, because they took advantage of some of the lower wages in Mexico for they to be able to manufacture goods. So one of the key targets that the US trade representative had, and that is published on the document that was delivered to President Trump regarding the effects of the USMCA in the economy of the United States, it's that right now they are targeting to have at least 34 billion in new automotive investments in the US. So in Mexico, we're not foreseeing that we will have any OEMs that will come to Mexico, at least in the next 5 years. But we will that opens a key opportunity for Mexico, because a lot of the tier 1 and tier 2 automotive suppliers will come to Mexico, and they will reshore from either Asia or Europe to be able to deliver some goods to the U.S. So that is one of the top legal issues that we're facing right now. That we do believe that at least for the 5 next years will bring a lot of billable hours and also questions from the clients. The second part, of course, that is a huge concern that we currently have is that, as you have probably saw on the news right now, our president, it's kind of spending a lot of money. He's on the left side of the equation here, and of course he's a populist, and he is just giving away money to a lot of people. He's granting scholarships to the kids. He's trying to create a program where a lot of the young people can be an apprentice and they are paid by the government, but without having a real target or a real focus. So of course the Mexican government is in the need of having additional resources. So they have been starting a quest, if you may say so, on assessing tax liabilities to big corporations, and also they are trying to pressure a lot of the companies for they to pay whatever old duties that they do have, or taxes on, or if they are challenging some of the resolutions issued by the Mexican tax authorities, they are trying to pressure as much as they can for they to come to a settlement. So over the past probably 2 or 3 or 3 months, there have been huge cases that have been settled by the Mexican government. The most famous right now would be Walmart. Walmart paid around 8 billion in Mexican pesos, of course. FEMSA, which is the largest Coca-Cola bottler in Mexico, and that they do own convenience stores like Oxxo, which is like our Mexican 7-Eleven, which is all abroad Latin America. Also, they entered into a huge settlement before the government. So right now, some mining companies, some consumer good companies, they are also the target of the Mexican government for they to expedite these tax settlements. So this is one of the other main concerns that we do have currently in the Mexican legal market, because instead of giving the opportunity for the companies to challenge any tax resolution through the appropriate jurisdictional courts or whatever, they're simply trying to push as much as they can, trying to start criminal charges against either the shareholders or some of the officers of corporations to try to corner them and settle these tax cases as quickly as they can. So it has been effective, although in our opinion, it's not that all of those companies, they did owe taxes. So this has been quite challenging in the past months, and a lot of companies, of course, they are being kind of reluctant on entering into any type of aggressive tax planning, if you may say so, because they are afraid that the company might come after them for trying to do this type of strategies, which are supported in accordance with the law. So this is one of the other things that needs for everyone to be reviewed, and of course, it's one of the biggest concerns that we currently have. Also, one of the other top legal issues that we currently have is the labor reform that happened probably 2 years ago in Mexico, and that has been deployed over the past year and a half, and especially with the entry into force of the USMCA. Mexico needs to speed up a lot of the reforms required in accordance with with whatever we committed in the USMCA. So pretty much some of the things that are currently happening in Mexico, it's the collective bargaining agreements. They need to be public. They need to be at the end of the day refreshed in accordance with the new regulations. That will bring some type of friction between unions in Mexico. So it's something that everyone should be looking at. Also, with the entry into force of the USMCA, there are new procedures that if, for example, a supplier, a union or a worker says that he feels or that his collective rights were at the end of the day threatened, he can file a complaint before the U.S. or Canada, and they have the capabilities of starting a quick review process in which some of the USMCA privileges, like having preferential duty treatment or or limiting export capabilities of a company, might be into force if some of these labor issues are not solved quickly. So that's also something that has been keeping everyone's busy during the past months, and especially because some of the I do practice trade and customs, so labor, of course, it's not part of my expertise. But with the USMCA right now, a lot of clients are demanding that we do provide this type of advice. So we have been commingling with our labor practice to provide a whole package service to review what will be the impacts at some point if these requirements are not met. So that would be kind of the third biggest concern that we currently have. And finally, one of the other legal issues that we're currently facing, it's the Mexico's Ministry of Energy and Resources. They have limited, with new guidelines that were published recently, the access for the private sector to participate in the renewable energy sector. So they have been reluctant on either granting new licenses or keeping their the contracts that were signed in the past. So right now this has been stopped by the Supreme Court in Mexico, but still the Mexican government is not that eager for private companies to enter into the electric sector. They want to strengthen our electric public company. So this has been quite challenging, of course, also during the past months, which of course is not good for foreign investment in Mexico. So at the end of the day, I would say that those are, at this point, the top legal issues that need to be monitored. And if at some point you do have any clients that they do want to invest in Mexico, or that currently they do have investments in Mexico, just to oversee these key factors, how the USMCA will impact their current operations, in case they do have any tax liability assessed by the authorities, just to verify if they are not getting any type of pressure for they to settle. Of course, the impacts that they might have with the labor reform, to verify if their unions are fully recognized in accordance with the labor regulations. And finally, if you have any clients and engaged in the electric sector or the renewables energy sectors, so they might be having a hard time right now because of these new guidelines that were published recently. Okay, so those are the top legal issues that we see in Mexico. What are the key threats that I see regarding the operation of our firms and, of course, of our clients? First of all, like in the rest of the world, the lockdown. It's hitting working capital. The sourcing has been having delays, and of course, the sales on a lot of the products have been lower on a monthly basis. Right, just this week, the Mexican Convenience Store Association published their figures for the last semester, and the sales dropped probably 20 to 23%. So that's huge, even though that, especially during lockdown, you do buy a lot of groceries and things like that. So that's something to be concerned. Of course, in Mexico, different from the US, where there was published a critical sector of critical infrastructure sector, and you were allowed to continue operating in Mexico, we limited a lot of the sectors that were allowed to continue working during lockdown, and that of course stopped a lot of the industries in Mexico. For example, automotive was shut down for at least 3 months, so the sales dropped dramatically in Mexico, and of course our exports, either from auto parts and also from finished vehicles were or they lowered probably up to 90% at this point. So that was kind of hard for our industries. And right now, recently, we are reopening to the world, but still, as I was hearing some of the comments prior of going live today, and things in Mexico are not getting better. Of course, we're getting a lot of new cases of COVID-19 on a daily basis. So this has been quite challenging and has been impacting the businesses a lot, and especially because this lack of coordination between the federal, local, and state governments in enabling or allowing the companies to start production again. One of the other key threats that we currently have in Mexico, and as I was mentioning, the federal government is spending a lot of money that they do not have. And of course, they're downsizing a lot of the bureaucratic structure of the government. So this is not, at the end of the day, or they didn't have a complete plan. They only started firing some of the officers. So this has brought some complications in all of the interactions that we do have with the federal government. First of all, it's of course any licenses that you might apply or permits or any type of authorization, of course, is getting a delay because the government has less workforce, and of course, aside COVID-19, they have been delaying or taking more time to process everything that is filed before them. So at this point, is one of the key challenges that we have, especially when we're receiving new investments or companies that they do want to have a specific authorization. For example, the maquiladora, which is a very common operational setup in Mexico, in which you are allowed to import on a temporary basis goods. So we have been facing delays that didn't happen in the past. Right now, it's getting better, but still, over the past months, that was something that stressed a lot of the legal environment in Mexico. What other key threats do we see for Mexico, especially M&A? Right now, a lot of companies, as everywhere in the world, as they are downsizing, they're having less sales, and of course, they're getting impacted by the lockdown. Might be target for bigger corporations for they to be acquired, which is not a bad thing, but especially because of the threshold for the competition commission in Mexico, that might allow that a lot of the new takeovers or hostile takeovers might happen without having the need of filing this notice, pre-merger notices before the competition authority. So at some point, some of the companies might be an easy target for other corporations. And one of the other things that it's not related to the legal environment per se is that next year we will have in Mexico a midterm election. So right now, the political scenario has been kind of hot at this point. So we have two sides, of course, the government officials and the president and his party and everyone else, because right now they do have a complete different vision on how things should be conducted. Right now, the president has a majority in both chambers, so the opposition is trying to be very proactive and trying for next year for they to be able to have more presence in both chambers to try to stop some of these reforms that have been proposed by the federal government. So at the end of the day, and that will also impact the business environment in Mexico. But of course, not everything is bad. Mexico is still a great place to invest, and we do have a lot of good things to offer to the world. So we do see some key opportunities for the near future. First of all, it's the automotive integration through the region. As I was mentioning earlier on the call, due to the USMCA entry into force, a lot of companies will need to reconfigure their sourcing within our three countries. Sorry. So we do expect that a lot of the production that, as I was mentioning, that currently is carried out either in Asia or in Europe will be brought into Mexico, the USA, or Canada, and that, of course, will integrate more the supply chain. This is a huge market, as I was mentioning. Just it's targeted by the USTR that the investments in OEMs, as I was mentioning, it's 34 billion. That should also trigger 76,000 jobs in the US, and for Mexico, probably 30,000 jobs within the next 5 years. So it's a very interesting time just to be close to the automotive sector. And especially because these new requirements on the rules of origin will require more production in the three countries of North America. So it would be a good opportunity just to stay close to this part. Also, Mexico will expand its free trade capabilities with Brazil regarding the automotive sector. I know that we're having some discussions with Argentina. Maximo will probably speak a little bit more of that later, but that will bring also a key opportunity to have a regional hub, at least for Mexico, in which you will have OEM suppliers or tier one or tier twos that are from all the regions and will be located in Mexico, and will be able to produce either for the North American region or for Latin America in general. Also, one of the other opportunities that we do see is that with the tariffs imposed by the US to China, there are a lot of companies that are rethinking about their supply chain. So we are seeing a lot of nearshoring and reshoring of the operations that on the past were moved either from the US or China or Mexico to China. They're coming back because of course, they do want to take advantage of the preferential duty rates of the USMCA, and also they want to take advantage of the other FTA agreements that Mexico has entered in the past. We are one of the countries that has the most of benefits with other countries. We do have 14 FTAs entered up to date, and especially last year when we entered the CPTPP, we do have access to a different market that was not under the radar in Mexico. So that's something that also would be interesting for us as practitioners, because a lot of companies will come to our region and they will require either legal services or will require analysis from all of us. And especially what we have seen over the past 3 or 4 years is that companies that come back to Mexico, or that they want to nearshore, they want a one-stop shop solution. So we will need to change the mindset in which we offer legal services to our clients and try to deliver a solution in which we could provide a soft landing, one-stop shop offering of services, and that we can create some synergies with either park developers or companies that they do specialize on relocating either expats or things like that, for us to be able to deliver one single service and tell them, if you come with me, I can structure everything that you need for your business for you to start from day one. And in Mexico, I do believe that would be some of the key services that we will be rendering in the near future. Also, one of the other opportunities that the COVID-19 brought to us is that a lot of companies, first of all, because they wanted to keep production and not be shut down, they reconfigured their production lines. And right now, a lot of companies that were in different business are manufacturing personal protective equipment right now. And either we like it or not, we're facing a new reality, a new normal, and we will require to use face masks, to use gloves, or things like that at least for the next 2 or 3 years in our work centers. So a lot of companies right now, they are investing and switching productions to manufacture this type of goods, which we also see a good opportunity for the coming future. And finally, in Mexico, as I was mentioning, the president has his own agenda. He's very narrow in the things that he is proposing, and he has 3 top initiatives at this point. First of all, it's the new airport. If you heard some of the news, we were building a new airport in Mexico. Prior of he entering the office, he made like a poll in which the people decided not to continue with the construction of that airport. that was really unfortunate. But right now they are building a new airport for Mexico City, so there is room for companies to act as suppliers for the government for that particular project. Also, there's the Dos Bocas refinery in Mexico, which is in the south of Mexico. This is a new refinery. It's targeted to be completed within 3 years. So also regarding the oil and gas industry, there is room for being a supplier of the government. They have a lot of money to spend because they want to finish fast this project. So it's a good opportunity also to bring this type of suppliers to Mexico. And finally, in the southeast, there's a new initiative that is the Mayan Railroad, which will be all over the Yucatan Peninsula. If you have had a chance to go to Merida or to Cancun, this will be a more intended for a railroad intended for tourism. And of course, there's room for construction companies, for railroad suppliers to have a big piece of business entering into those three key projects that currently the Mexico government has. That's as far as of key opportunities. And finally, the future of trade and foreign investment in Mexico. How do I see it? First of all, it's because of the lockdown, because of COVID-19, all of the countries saw that you cannot stick with to a single partner in terms of trade. So Mexico right now is trying to create a policy to expand the FTA utilization that I was mentioning earlier. So if we do have a lot of countries that we can enter into foreign trade, let's just try to divest our exports, because right now we are exporting almost 80% of our total exports to the US. So we're targeting to have a more divested market in the short future, and of course to open new markets. Also, one of the other things that I do see that will happen, as I was mentioning, it's the rebalancing of all the supply chains. Sourcing everything from Asia will no longer be an option. So we will be seeing more nearshoring, and not precisely Mexico, because a lot of the industries will come back to the US, to Mexico. Central America, South America are also good options for a deeper integration. So I do believe that we will see a dramatic change in the rebalancing of the supply chain. Just to give you an example, right now there's an e-congress of supply chain, which is held with professionals all over the world. So these 3 days there have been having lectures about how do they see that the supply chain will be reconfigured for the next 4 or 5 years. And everyone agrees that we will no longer be seeing offshoring supply chain structures. We will be seeing more regional supply chain solutions for at least for the consolidated industries. And finally, one of the things that was not fully deployed nor integrated in our culture as Mexicans, it's the e-com. With the COVID-19, the e-com process and the tropicalization of the e-com practice in Mexico speed up a lot. So right now we do see that all the e-com platforms in Mexico, they are expanding their storage capabilities. They are opening DCs all over the country. So the e-com business will be growing more and more over in the next probably 5 or 6 years. Just to give you an example, the retail stores in Mexico, they have seen over the past 3 or 4 months that their sales decreased probably 30-40%, and the sales on the e-com, in accordance with the latest reports that were published last month, the sales in e-com increased about 56%. So either Amazon, Mercado Libre in the region that is from Argentina, of course, and all of these platforms, they have been, of course, preparing themselves to be able to deliver the goods more quickly. Right now, of course, also the courier services in Mexico, they have been expanding. They have been also acquiring more land or leasing more land to have bigger distribution centers. Unfortunately, in this particular piece, Mexico at the end of at the beginning of the year, they implemented a tax on digital services, including the e-com. So right now it became enforced on June the 1st. So the downside of it is that although the business is growing, right now they are paying bigger taxes, and also the end user is paying more taxes because right now VAT and special withholding on income tax for the seller, it's being applied to the sales on e-com. So let's hope that that doesn't prevent the growth that has been happening. So I hope that I didn't bother you. Was speaking so fast, but this is pretty much the legal perspective that we do have in Mexico and that we see as a firm, and also what we have seen in accordance with the things that we have been serving our clients with over the past months.
Thank you, Roberto. That was extremely interesting and really timely information. So just to keep things moving, I want to move on to the next speaker, and then we'll come back and talk about any of these things that people have questions about. So our next speaker is Alejandra Bernal. Alejandra is a partner with CRF Rojas in La Paz in Bolivia. So Alejandra, I am turning it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. I will be giving you a legal overview for Bolivia, and I will start off with a digital signature. As in other countries, the COVID-19 pandemic and the strict quarantine ordered by the Bolivian government restricting mobility have drastically affected the Bolivian companies. One of the processes that have been most difficult in Bolivia due to this situation is the operational part of the companies, which involves the signing of any type of contracts. Although until now, most of the companies in Bolivia continue to implement their contracts in person, we consider that the COVID pandemic has forced us to advance on the issue of digital signatures, electronic contracts, as well as the online processing of permits and registrations of companies, which were only carried out in person before the COVID pandemic. The telecom law number 164 provides the legality of electronic contracts, electronic and digital signatures. In accordance with our current regulation, the following uses are established for a digital certificate. First, any legal act or business carried out by a natural or legal entity in a digital document and accepted by the parties by means of a digital signature held by electronic means. Second, the electronic data message, and third, the digital signature. The same regulation exempts the use of the digital signature for the following acts. The first one, the acts proper to family law. Second, the acts in which the law requires the personal appearance of any of the parties. And third, the legal acts or businesses provided under law that for their validity or enforcement require a physical document agreed by the parties. Now, as you are aware, the digital signature is a technological tool that ensures the origin of a digital document or message and verifies that its content has not been altered. It is mandatory for a digital certificate to be issued by an authorized certifying entity, which responds to international recognized formats and standards. In Bolivia, there are currently 2 entities authorized to issue digital signature certificates. The first entity is called ATSIB, which responds to the telecom regulator. ATSIB is a public entity for technological services, designated as the only public authorized certifying entity in charge of issuing digital signature certificates. Also, there is a private company named DigiCert, which was born out of the need to provide digital services for secure technological environment and to also contribute to the development of the electronic government and encourage the use of technology in the business environment, thus promoting development of companies. So as features of the digital signature, we can point out the validation of the identity of the holder of the digital signature. It also authenticates the ownership of the digital signature. It links a digital document or electronic data message with a digital signature and the person, and it guarantees integrity of the digital document or electronic message. The benefits of these features: first, the most important, security, time and travel savings. It does not require physical presence, and a paperless policy that reduces the environmental impact. And it also allows to carry out procedures at any time and in digital form, and as well as saving in messaging and physical files. For all the aforementioned, the use of the digital signature is recommended since it has a much higher level of security than the electronic signature, but it requires a previous certification where, in a simple process, the biometric data of the signer is validated and it is assigned a digital certificate. So it is recommended to use it in the following cases. First, we recommended to use it in contracts with significant amounts or that are macro agreements for the relationship with a counterparty. For example, distribution agreements and agreements with major suppliers. Second, in recurring contracts or contracts with the same parties, since these parties could go through the process of certifying your digital signature, it would not be a problem to use it repeatedly. For example, contracts with clients where authorizations or consents have to be provided constantly. And third, to close agreements with parties located abroad. However, this type of transaction must be analyzed on a case-by-case basis because its usefulness may vary depending on the country and which entity certifies a digital signature abroad. Now, it is important to point out the difference between the electronic signature and the digital signature. First, I must explain each concept. The electronic contracts or e-contracts are all those digital representations of acts, facts, or data, regardless of the means used to fix, store, or display them, which can be used to implement any type of transaction permitted by law. An e-contract can be formed, for example, via email or through the exchange of electronic documents. On the other hand, the digital signature is one that it is electronic, represented by means that allow the owner to be identified and that links the data of the document and the signatory in such a way that any modification of these can evidence their alteration. The signer must have a digital certificate from the digital signature certifying entity, and the digital signature is used to validate the document to determine its authenticity and that it has not been altered. This plays a fundamental role in verifying the identity of the author or signatory of the document. This type of signature has a high security and is used as evidence at trial. And finally, the electronic signature is an electronic symbol, process, or sound associated with a registration or a contract. In other words, the electronic signature can come in a format as simple as accepting a document with a click or an electronic version of a signature by hand. In Bolivian regulations, classify any signature in electronic format that does not have a digital certificate as an electronic signature. Taken together, these electronic means of contracting provide the businesses with low-cost, immediate, and secure way to execute contracts. In this context, although electronic contracts are useful for all cases permitted by law, there are certain cases where it may be more useful to use the electronic signature, and in other cases, the digital one. As mentioned, all these digital contracting means are valid under Bolivian regulations and may be used as evidence at trial. However, certain care must be taken for each part of digital contracting according to the following. First, for electronic contracts, If your company will use electronic contracts as a daily part of its operations, it is advisable to think about the drafting, signing, and filing of these contracts as part of a system, and that it be revised by legal counsel in addition to technicians, in order for each stage of the contract can be guaranteed in case of issue resulting from fraud or any wrongdoing. Second, the digital signature is a completely secure mechanism for signing contracts. It is important to obtain the digital signature certificate from an authorized certification entity. And finally, the electronic signature, where Bolivian regulations allow this signature to be used as evidence at trial. In this sense, it is recommended that the implementation and filing of this type of signature be filed with information that will denote the identity of the signatory, his express consent to the document. Third, to associate his consent to a specific text, for example, the terms and conditions. And fourth, any other evidence that the person voluntarily participated in this transaction. It is also recommended to keep a file of the different interactions within the same transaction. The continuity of actions helps to prove the consent of the parties towards the conditions of the transaction. As I mentioned previously, the process to obtain a certificate for the digital signature is quite simple. For a natural person, you only need a national or a foreign identification document and the latest utility bill. And for a legal entity, you need a national and foreign identification document, original authorization from a legal entity, signed by the legal representative, and documents showing the tax identification number. The process for obtaining a digital signature certificate is very simple. You only have to log in to the web page, register as a user in the register button, log in, create a new request, choose a certificate profile if you're a natural person or a legal entity, upload the requirements according to the certificate profile. You have to also upload your photograph, generate a key pair, and pay for online services, which are really low cost in Bolivia because it has an annual fee for a natural person for only $11. And for a legal entity, it's $23, and this is for the whole year. So it's pretty low cost. Once the digital signature certificate has been secured, the company will require a cryptographic device, a digital signature program, and the document can be the document that will be signed. And with that, you can issue the digital signed document. That is something new in Bolivia. Well, it's not new. It's actually been regulated for about 7 years now, but it's now being implemented due to the pandemic. So, well, now moving on to intellectual property. As known, since March 11th, when the World Health Organization declared the world pandemic situation, and March 22nd, when Bolivia entered a strict quarantine as a result of COVID, our lives, our daily routine, both personally and professionally, have suffered an interruption, which has also had a high impact on the world, both humanly and economically. Although we have had to stop work in our companies completely or partially due to COVID, I consider that trademarks in these last 3 months have gone through positive changes and have acquired greater recognition and value for companies. Companies around the world and in Bolivia are currently in a situation of constant change, and with the effect that COVID has had on our daily lives and professional activities. In these difficult moments, companies, through their trademarks, had to seek more than ever to have a complete vision of the reality we are all going through and always work one step ahead. So it is extremely important that companies to have a predictive analysis team that can help improve reaction capacity and be prepared to lead decision-making based on the current situation. The brands with most public recognition in their reaction have been those that have been adapted to the conversations that the consumers were already promoting and that have found the point of union with their purpose to be relevant in market. This pandemic situation has shown that the citizens in general look at brands as a pillar of stability in the most difficult moments, in search of comfort or security that they do not always find at other times. So that those brands that reinforce the feeling of calm or well-being will generate more positive emotional ties. COVID issues have generated a deep crisis for both our country and our companies. So in addition to the what I said before, companies have had to make a call for conscious consumption, and this was only obtained through recommendations or calls to make purchases online from local businesses, with extra emphasis on the Bolivian industry. It is for all this that trademarks and the entire process that revolves around trademarks, both in production and final delivery to the consumer, are extremely important for the success of our companies during this pandemic, since the consumer wants to be informed, and for this reason is that companies must always be one step ahead. Having a predictive analysis team of the constant changes that may occur with the trademarks in the production of the products that contain the brands or the services that the company offers. This team must take into account the importance of protecting their intellectual property rights, and this is only obtained by registering their trademarks. Since with quarantine, the information that we receive through social media not only reaches our clients or consumers, but it also reaches wrongdoers that will try to take advantage by registering third-party brands, either to obtain an economic benefit or to take advantage of the fame that the company has obtained through a lot of human work and also economic investment. The good news in this case for Bolivia is that despite being in quarantine and unable to mobilize normally, is that the Bolivian Trademark Office on April 20th issued an administrative resolution number 013-2020, through which it resolves to authorize the reception of applications for registrations of trademarks, patents, name changes, address assignments, mergers, and also renewals of trademarks through their website. First, the applicant can file their application through the BTO virtual platform under the condition of filing the physical documentation within 5 business days. The user must log on to the BTO's webpage and fill out the corresponding form, either to apply for registration of a trademark or patent, renewal of the application. Once this form is completed, the user must scan all the documents and require for filing an application according to Decision 486 of the Andean Pact and the specific regulations from the BTO. The user has to send scanned copies of the applications and documentation to the BTO's email's address based on the applicant's jurisdiction in Bolivia. And once the documentation is filed, the BTO will record the filing of the application and must verify compliance with the presentation of the requirements established by law. If the BTO confirms that the information submitted by the user meets the requirements, the BTO will confirm payment of the official fees. And if the verification is satisfactory, the financial administrative director of the BTO will certify the information by email so that the technician receiving the application continues with the admission of the application, for which purpose he will issue an approval and verification form, and which will be automatically generated. This approval and verification of compliance requirement form will be immediately sent to the user through the email registered with the BTO. And as I said, upon admission of by the BTO, the applicant must formalize their application within 5 business days, filing the supporting physical documentation, and if failing to comply with these terms will result in the application being considered non-filed in accordance with the WTO rules. So this is pretty much it. Thank you very much. And we will be happy to assist with your client's needs in Bolivia.
Thank you, Alejandra. Thanks for the detailed and useful information for those of us who have clients doing business in Bolivia. So let's continue our trip south and arrive in Argentina. Maximo Richard is going to tell us what's going on in the legal market in Argentina. Maximo is a partner with Beccar Varela, who's our member there in Buenos Aires. Maximo, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Greetings, everybody, and thank you for inviting us to this program. I will be presenting the Argentina overview, and I would like to focus this presentation on some legal matters that are deriving from two current issues that have become intertwined. These are the pre-existing national economic crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, since new administration took over last December, a battery of measures have been passed to fight an overall state of national crisis. On this matter, statute number 27501 has declared economic, financial, tax, administrative, energetic, sanitary, and social national crisis. So it pretty much affects every sector of our country. And the government response to this situation was to adopt a policy of favor towards internal commerce over foreign trade. Since last December, we have seen a downfall in both exports and imports, precisely $1.6 billion worth of exports, representing about 25% of the overall volume, and $0.8 billion, representing about 18% of the overall volume for imports. So these numbers, I think, clearly reflects the policy adopted by the government previous to the COVID-19 pandemic. And from a legal standpoint, this policy has been materialized in three primary measures, which are an increase in the tax pressure both on import and export operations, an increase in the restrictions to access the foreign exchange market, and also a tightening of the administrative barriers over foreign commerce through non-automatic licenses. Regarding tax pressure, well, the commented statute 27541 has increased the applicable statistics fee for definitive import operations from 2.5% to 3%, and has also increased the limits applicable to export operations from 30% to 33% of the tax base. On fourth, the decree number 3719, which regulates this statute and was executed to address the economic crisis our finances are undergoing, aims to change the additional export duty regime that was introduced on 2012, but is now established by Decree 793 of 2018, and removes some of the applicable limits on the applicable export duty. The previous regime established a 12% additional export duty that had a limit that consisted of a fixed exchange rate at 4 or 3 pesos to a dollar. This regime applied to a selected universe of tariff positions. Now the new decree has removed the 4 pesos to a dollar limit and so the full 12% additional export duty has become applicable. In a similar manner, Decree 99 of 19 has implemented a 5% export duty on the export of services. The previous regime consisted of a 12% export duty, but also with a fixed exchange rate of 4 pesos to a dollar. So in practice, this removal of this fixed exchange rate has substantially increased the applicable export duty. As a comparative example, an export of $1 worth of services with the previous regime would pay around half a peso of export duty, and with the current regime would pay 4 pesos export duties. If you take that to the 12% applicable to additional export duties of goods, then the result is a lot more higher. So these changes should be added to a general tax ecosystem that contemplates about 6 duties or taxes applicable for import operations and 3 duties and taxes applicable to export operations. Some particular goods have more internal taxes applicable, but this is the general regime. Specifically, we have the following duties and taxes. For imports, we have the import duties per se that can be either specific or ad valorem. The former is a fixed figure, and the latter is the most common of both, and consists of a percentage that is applicable over the CIF value of the good, and can amount up to 35% of the CIF value. Also, it's applicable VAT and the added VAT tax to every definitive import operation, and can amount to 21% and 20% respectively of the CIF value of the goods, plus the applicable import duty. Also, we have an income tax applicable that can amount to 11% of the CIF value of the goods and the applicable import duties. A gross income tax that can amount to 2.5% of the CIF value of the goods with the applicable import duties, and a statistics fee that is applicable for both import and export operations, which was increased by the commented statute number 27501. That it was increased to 3% of the CIF value of the goods and 2.5% of the tax base of the goods for export operations. On the export side, the export duties per se, that can also be specific or ad valorem, being the latter most commonly applied, was increased to 33%, and the additional export duties commented before, that are now of a full 12% applicable over the tax base of the goods. In overall, we have total tax pressure on imports of 115% of the CIF value of the goods, and of about 48% for export operations. So much for tax pressure. Moving to the restrictions over foreign exchange. On May 2020, our central bank, that is the entity in charge of controlling the foreign exchange, issued 2 communications, communication A7030 and A7001, that regulate the access to the foreign exchange market on 4 accounts: on freely available funds and access to the FX market, to the foreign exchange market in general, for the payments of imports and commercial indebtedness, for financial indebtedness, and for transactions with security. Regarding the access to the foreign exchange market, financial institutions must request their clients that they submit an affidavit stating that they have no foreign currency holdings deposited outside. I'm sorry, that they have all their foreign currency holdings deposited in local financial institutions, so they must not have any foreign currency outside the banking system. This includes safety security boxes. Also, that they have no foreign liquid assets. They have coined this term to define cash in foreign currency, gold, on-demand deposits on foreign financial institutions, and other investments that allow for immediate liquidity. And finally, they must include a plea to transfer into Argentina and to convert to pesos any funds received abroad arising from loans, term deposits, and sales of any type of assets that were granted, constitute, or acquired after the entry into effect of these two communications on May 28. There are a few exceptions applicable. There is a limit of total of $100,000 worth of available foreign liquid assets that can be used without restriction. And also, you can access the foreign exchange market if on the same day you request access to the foreign exchange market, you fully use your available foreign liquid assets. So, in short, all the foreign available liquid assets must be used before accessing the foreign exchange market. Regarding payment of imports and commercial indebtedness, also an affidavit must be submitted declaring that the total amount of payments associated with imports during the current year does not exceed the amount that would have been applicable if every import conducted on this importer's behalf was recorded on the SEPA Impo system. This is the system that the central bank uses to track import payments. This includes cancellation of lines of credit and commercial warranties. And the exceptions are on medicinal products and payments of imports that have not yet been cleared by customs, as long as the total amount of payments pending clearance does not exceed $1 million in general or $3 million for medicinal products. Regarding offshore financial indebtedness with related counterparties, it's needed prior central bank approval in order to cancel principal payments, not interest payments, as long as the lender is a related party. Finally, with transactions with the securities, the restriction period was established, so financial institution must require an affidavit to customers in all foreign exchange sale transactions that they have not sold securities with settlements in foreign currency in the previous 90 days to the transaction, or nor they will do it in the 90 days after the transaction. This does not apply to operations carried out by the financial institutions themselves or to the cancellation of financing in foreign currency when the financing party are local entities, or when natural persons are transferring their money abroad, when these persons are beneficiaries of pensions provided by the local social security services. Then there was an implementation of an administrative barrier to foreign trade operations through non-automatic import licenses. These are licenses that must be requested previous to being authorized to procure an import operation. Though this mechanism was implemented in 2017, on January 9, 2020, the Secretariat of Knowledge, Economic, Industry and Foreign Trade issued Resolution 1-2020, which amends the import license regime and adds around 300 tariff codes to the scope of projects that are subject to these non-automatic import licenses. And it also modifies the process of request and approval of these non-automatic import licenses in a way that applications must now cannot be now filed incomplete. All the requested information must be fulfilled before the application is filed. And the previous regime allowed for a 10 business day period where an incomplete application could be fulfilled. And finally, it reduced both the tolerance of FOB values and quantities declared from 7% to 5% between what is actually declared and what is later imported. And also it reduced the validity term of the licenses from 180 days to 90 days period. Moreover, after the implementation of these measures, the administration, the government has taken a more active administration of the foreign commerce, using a great deal of discretion to reject and delay the approval of these non-automatic import licenses. So this has been posing a problem for a lot of our clients in the past months. Regarding key threats, we have identified 3 key threats that are the intensity of customs scrutiny over foreign trade, the implementation of reference values in export evaluation matters, and an overabundance of customs infractions with the risk of goods being detained. From our previous experience, triangular operations have been usually performed as a strategic way to avoid issues that we have previously described in this presentation. These operations usually involve a succession of sales where third-party intermediate is involved in a way that the exporter bills the third party and then the third party bills the importer. While this practice is specifically accepted worldwide, in fact, the Technical Committee of Customs Evaluation in their commentary number 22.1 has approved this practice and actually clarified that in cases of succession of sales, the last sale is to be considered to constitute the transaction value. Our customs frowns upon the practice and considers it generally suspicious. And therefore, it conducts a very intense scrutiny of operations, especially when the importer and the exporter are based in bordering countries, because they can verify through system Indira, which is a system that allows for bordering country customs to communicate between each other. They can verify the documented customs, the documented values before the two countries' customs. And if they perceive a difference between the exported value declared and the imported documented value, they will automatically observe the operation. This observation can either end in a value investigation or a value adjustment, or more often an indictment for an inaccurate declaration in the terms of section 954 of our customs code. This poses an issue for importers and exporters, because these observations may entail a delay in the operation, and also they come with an over cost that is to justify the documented value before customs. On the export side of the equation, recently through resolution 4710-20, our National Administration of Public Revenue has implemented reference values for export goods valuation. And through this mechanism, through this technique, they aim to protect the fiscal revenue and to modify the selectivity system for value appraisal matters on export goods, adding a primary control over export value through these precautionary reference values. The resolution itself only instructs customs to implement these reference values, and it established that any definitive export operation where the documented values deviate from these reference values that have to be established in any way will imply the allocation of the channel of verification red value, that is the most intense verification channel applicable for value. So when the documented value is inferior than the referential value, then this channel verification will be red value allocation will be mandatory, and if the documented value is superior to the reference value, then it will be optional for customs to allocate this channel. With this mechanism of allocation, also every other cost of allocation of this channel still apply, notwithstanding the value deviate from the reference value or not. The allocation of this channel does not necessarily imply a value adjustment, because these reference value are not a valid element to reject the transaction value as the primary means to produce the tax base of the exported goods according to a customs code. So they only serve to make an analysis of the export dispatch in an electronic manner through the computer. It does not imply also the detention of the goods nor the detention of the operation, but it can lead to an acceptance and or a rejection of the documented value, or a value investigation that will lead again to this acceptance or rejection of the value. Well, the point in this export reference value is that this technique is not either efficient nor effective to control the values of the exported goods. First of all, because it almost all the time requires a secondary check over the documented value, and this is because the reference values are inaccurate, and in almost every case they are outdated. In first place, because they do not contemplate all the elements that constitute the tax base, such as the time and place of the export operation, the included expenses in the export operation, such as the internal freight, the commercial level, all the discounts applicable in the commercial operation, and because the modification and elimination process of these reference values lack the agility to keep up with the dynamic reality of the international prices. They involve the participation of several customs departments and other government areas, as well as private parties, and they also require several instances of discussion between these parties, so that they take a very long time to be established, to be modified, and to be eliminated. As a matter of fact, they have been implemented over a month and a half ago, and still we have not seen established not one reference value. Well, this situation describes a general policy of very strict scrutiny over import and export operations, which leads to an overabundance of customs infraction, because there's a very high risk of detection of infractions, and also because customs agents have a natural tendency and a natural inclination to observe and indict operations in order to avoid disciplinary observations on their behalf. So this kind of creates a vicious circle where they continually indict operations, and they get continuously overflowed by customs indictment, and then overloaded by work, and so they start the circle once again. This is an issue for importer and exporters because the indictments have an additional risk of the detention of the goods by customs, and also because of the cost of litigation before customs. Although a successful defense is very often easily to present when the documented values reflect in import operations the amounts paid or payable, and in export operations they accurately reflect the tax base. The defense is pretty successful, but it does have an overcost of the operation that needs to be considered. So far, it's quite maybe a negative frame for Argentina's foreign trade, but there are some key opportunities to be presented because an unexpected advantage of the intense control over the foreign exchange market is the unfolding of the foreign exchange. Right now we have two foreign exchange markets, one formal foreign exchange market that is controlled by the central bank, and an informal, unregulated by the central bank market. And they do have a quite big spread in the difference of the exchange rate. The formal market has an exchange rate of 75 pesos to $1, and the informal market has an exchange rate of 127 pesos or so to $1. So the spread is pretty big. This allows to importers and exporters to perform import and export operations that provide access to the foreign exchange market at a reduced price in pesos, which allows to purchase goods at a lower cost, and also allows to sell the goods in the internal market at a very competitive price. In previous experience with this kind of regulations and situations, we see a lot of cases of sales storing because of this possibility to access to the foreign exchange market at a reduced price, such as the case of luxury cars in 2014. There was a very big spur of sales in luxury cars. With the COVID-19 pandemic in force right now and the country in quarantine, our economy is very low right now, and so these cases have not yet arisen. But when the quarantine is withdrawn, we do expect some of these opportunities to present themselves, especially in those sectors where there is no local competition, and so imports are not as protected. The national industry is not as protected from imports as it would be in other sectors of the industry. That can also be an opportunity if you bear in mind the effect that the COVID-19 pandemic will have on our economy and a lot of industries closing down. This will present probably a lot of opportunities for investment in imports and export operations. So, well, this was our presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Maximo. Throw open the floor to anybody who may have questions about for any of the speakers about any of the topics.
Yeah, this is Arnie Lutzker, and first I want to thank you. I mean, the presentations were extraordinarily detailed and useful, particularly for those in the field. And one thing I'd suggest is if you have any written material, to send it to us. In addition to presenting the recording online, we can incorporate any written material on the website that can identify you and the firm and sort of the substance of what you've been presenting, because I think that, you know, that would be very helpful. There's such detail, it's easy to, you know, to lose sight of it, but if we have multiple sources of materials, will be helpful. Roberto, I want to just sort of, this is an aside comment, I've got a separate question, but everybody's been attending a lot of Zoom sessions and meetings and whatever. Your room that you are in with your cars and figures and everything is one of the most captivating portions of a background that I've seen anywhere. And so I just commend you. I'm sure there's a lot of stories that you've got about what's behind you and on the side, but you know, we can save that for another day, but I just wanted to commend you about that. One issue that I want to sort of pose, it touches on Alejandro's trademark issue, but it also implicates trade generally. And Larry, you may also have a view. In the United States, I'm in Washington, D.C., there has been this intense effort by the Native American tribes to have the name of the Washington football team changed. I don't know if this is world news, if you follow this, but the Washington Redskins are ending their name and they're going to adopt a new name. They haven't adopted it yet because they've got trademark issues associated with this. But it sparks to my mind, and one of the things we've done, and my partner wife Susan has done some writing on this, and I'm particularly interested for Latin America, the import, is Native American societies that are in each of your countries have claims to symbols, words, phrases, imagery that implicates their culture, society, and themselves. And this, I think, is going to become a much more significant issue over the course of the coming years, highlighted in Washington by the changing of this particular name. But the question goes to whether, from a trademark and a branding and an import-export point of view, the words, phrases, names associated with native, indigenous people to your home countries has become a significant issue, whether it impacts trade, prevents trade, whether it allows for registration of trademarks or prohibits them, and sort of what is the import of that. And it may be a topic that we can, on an IMBLF cross-border basis, provide more robust discussion about. You know, it may be too complicated a question to sort of deal with, you know, maybe the little time that we have remaining, but just to sort of initiate the discussion and then maybe create an internal discussion within the network and the group about that issue.
Yeah, well, actually in Bolivia, Decision 486 of the NDM Pact prohibits any registration on native tribes or symbols or flags. They are not allowed. So, for example, if a trademark similar to Redskins were to be registered in Bolivia, but oriented to a Bolivian tribe, the Bolivian Trademark Office would not accept the registration. They would deny it. Mm-hmm. So we don't have that type of problems like you are having in the U.S. with the Redskins, because they do not allow it. Our regulations do not allow it.
But one of the issues related to that was there was a situation similar in Australia, where symbols of Australian Aboriginals were discovered in Poland in connection with carpeting in a hotel. And that became an issue, sort of exporting. And it sort of is the issues associated with, the worldwide commerce and communications. I don't know if between Argentina and Mexico, if there's any, if this is of current discussion in your countries.
Well, in the case of Mexico, there's no provision that prevents you, like in the case of Bolivia. As a matter of fact, in Mexico, one of the top-selling brands of Heineken in Mexico, which was Mexican, part of the portfolio of the Mexican brewery that Heineken acquired 5 or 6 years ago, it's in Cerveza India, which is Indian beer. So it's one of the top-selling brands in Mexico. We do not have an issue for using that type of brand. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I can share, or you can just Google the logo. It's Indio, and no one feels discriminated or that they are kind of attacking their ancestry or something like that. It's simply a brand. So it's particular in trademark in Mexico. There's no provision that prevents that. And of course, we do have other brands in Mexico that make reference to either the tribes, or there's a brand in Mexico also that it's that they have used a lot of the Aztec symbols for their clothing, and they are allowed to register them, and no one has make a big deal of it. So
sorry. Likewise, in Argentina, it's really not an issue here. We do have some brands that refer to some indigenous population. For instance, the Mapuche brand, and it's really not an issue. So we don't know of any cases or any troubles similar to the Redskins case in Washington. Here, it's really not a problem.
So I'll just say, for folks who may not know, in the U.S., and Arnie, you know a lot more about trademark law than I do, but marks that are scandalous are not allowed to be trademarked. So that's sort of a moving scale depending on time. But there was a Supreme Court case recently on for a band, a rock band, that had a name that people thought was an Asian American slur. So although it was, I guess, debatable, and eventually the Supreme Court found that they could trademark the name basically on First Amendment grounds. On the trade side, there's not a lot of restrictions for branding. There are restrictions on the importation of articles that look like Native American jewelry that are not Native American jewelry. They can be imported, but they have to be labeled in a particular way to identify them as not being Native American turquoise. That's an unusual regulation. Then there's also the U.S. is party to the convention involving the movement of cultural property, which is not necessarily, again, for branding issues, but it does involve the restrictions on the movement of artifacts and items that are linked specifically to a particular culture, a particular ethnographic or historical perspective. So there are some restrictions trade-wise, but the issue you're raising, Arnie, is a interesting and important bigger question. And I will say, Arnie, before you jumped on, I did give Susan a plug for her really good article on the Australian Aboriginal art and environment case. So it was a nice article. So, any other questions before we wrap up? I want to be mindful of everybody's time. Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Larry, and to all the colleagues in this meeting. I wanted to say something in Spanish, and I'll say it in English. Quería saludar a todos mis colegas de México, de Bolivia y de Argentina. Aquí tienes un colega en New York City y ojalá podamos hacer algo junto en el futuro a través de INBLF. What I said to my colleagues was it was great to be able to speak Spanish with some fellow members from our great organization, and thanking them for the work and suggesting that at some appropriate time in the future we should collaborate together and do something like this, like a Latin America forum through INBLF in Spanish, and obviously open it up to everybody and maybe have some English component. Anyways, so putting that aside, my core expertise, my firm's core expertise here in New York City, based in New York City, is tax, and we do a lot of international tax. So I really appreciate hearing some of the tax comments, particularly from Roberto and Maximo as well. Very brief question to my colleague Roberto. You mentioned that Mexico is jumping on the bandwagon with respect to digital taxation, obviously a very hot topic in Europe and here in the US and other jurisdictions. Maybe this is too technical. If not, we could discuss some other time. With respect to how Mexico is attempting to tax digital goods, digital income, we know that it would be probably either through a gross receipts type of base or through a net income base or some combination. Roberto, do you happen to know broad strokes how Mexico is purporting to establish the sourcing for that, right? Because the sourcing could be, for instance, where the customers are of those digital goods, or where the income producing activities underlying those digital goods, or where the brain power is for the company. There's different ways of doing it. So I'll give the floor to you, and thank you all once again.
Yeah, of course. In the Mexican case, in the way that the digital tax was structured, it's that, of course, it's a consumer base, and all foreign companies that they do provide digital services, Airbnb, Zoom, Amazon, whatever, they need to register before the Mexican IRS, and you need to appoint a legal representative. So in that way, you will need to have the monthly reporting on all the services rendered through the platform, and that's how they will collect either the VAT or the withholding income tax for the local businesses that use their platforms. Pretty much is how it's structured. I do believe that we did prepare some type of e-newsletter from the firm. I can share it to you. Just shoot me an email and I will circulate through the group.
Terrific. Thank you again. Thank you.
And Roberto, that's something we could also circulate more generally too within the network if you want. And
yeah, perfect.
And to follow up on one of the thoughts I've had sort of on a longer term basis would be to establish, like we have in Asia and Europe, a Latin American summit. This will be a post-COVID activity, but to have us get together on a periodic basis in Latin America, I think the more INBLF members can visit and associate in Latin America, I think it would be fabulous. So
that'd be great.
We can also set up a networking, also Zoom for Latin America, and include different members from the United States that are interested in, or have clients that are interested in doing business in Latin America. So that's something to look forward to in the future. So
yeah, Marcin, I want to second that, because again, we don't know when COVID is going to change. It's all speculation from my point of view. And yeah, we should definitely look forward to the future when we do something in person and make it a great success for everybody and for the organization. But maybe doing, like Marcin said, some intermittent Zoom or some other platforms, whatever, and do a Latin American forum. Just make it a few hours to not overwhelm people, but to kind of just get us going with it and exchanging ideas, tax, trade, and so on and so forth.
Great. Well, thank you to everybody for participating. Appreciate all of your time and attention. And thanks again to our speakers. And we look forward to seeing everybody on the next Great Legal Minds webinar.